Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We welcome you again to the weekly sessions that we run on methodology, and today we want to continue to discuss. We want to continue to discuss the approaches that we started last week to talk about. I think last week we talked more about how do we select an approach. How do we select an approach? How do we link our approaches to the philosophy? How do we link our approaches to the problem? How do we link our approach to the audience that we are dealing with? So today we want to proceed and talk about qualitative methods, especially in terms of its data analysis. And today I have a guest. So today I have a guest. His name is called Dr. Takayedza Mnangatire. He is from the University of Namibia. He is from the health sciences, and so he is going to help us to discuss quite a number of issues that we are going to discuss here. Just give me 1 minute. I think I need to sort out some issues. People are making noise, so I need to mute everyone. Right, so we are going to go through this discussion. So like I said, myself, Dr. Admaya Mare, and Dr. Takayedza Mnangatire from the University of Namibia is a senior academic in the health sciences. So he's going to also come in and chip and give us block by block aspects of qualitative data analysis. So like I was saying, that's the focus of today that we want to achieve. So in achieving this, I am just trying to give you a recap of what we talked about last week. Last week, we focused more on the philosophical worldviews, the positivism, constructivism, transformative, and pragmatism. And these are crucial aspects, these are crucial views that influences what kind of methodology one is going to use, what kind of design one is going to use, and they also informs aspects of methods. So in these components, these are the three major components that speaks to an approach. So we covered the philosophical worldviews. Today we wanted to focus more on the research methods. Remember, I told you that methodology is not the same as methods. So, and the component of methods that we want to focus more is the aspect of data analysis. That is the component we want to talk about. And previously last week, we also highlighted to you what qualitative methodology is. And we discussed that it is seen based on the design that you are using, the use of qualitative research as the basic intent. The symbol you use, qualitative researchers like Dr. Mari and Dr. Taka, they don't use big symbols like what we do in quantitative methodologies. It is seen based on the data collection procedures or the data recording procedures that you are going to do, and the methods of data analysis, which is our focus today, as well as the methods of presenting and interpreting and validating this kind of information we are talking about. So before I let the two gentlemen to come in, I would maybe want to just share a few things there before maybe Dr. Admire Mari comes in first to give us a strengthened discussion on the characteristics of qualitative research. These are the characteristics, and maybe Dr. Mari, you may come in through and explain to us what do we mean by saying data is collected in natural settings, the researcher is the key instrument, multiple sources of data, and all that. Over to you, Dr. Mari.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Awoyo. Good afternoon again. Once again, it's a pleasure to have you once again on this platform where we are going to discuss pretty much more around qualitative data analysis today. So as I want to continue from where we left off last week, the main issue here is to understand that data in a qualitative research project is usually collected in what we call natural settings. And when we are saying natural settings, I think last time I talked about the issue of, for example, we talk about ethnography, where we are saying, for example, you want to understand maybe the organizational culture of a particular organization. So instead of just going there and administer questionnaires and then you leave that particular environment, we are saying rather you can actually stay there for the next, let's say for 14 days, and you'll be going like you're almost like working there, but what you are pretty much doing is pretty much observing what is actually happening. So you are collecting data in its natural habitat or in its natural setting. So you are more interested in what is actually being investigated. So you try as much as possible to immerse yourself in that particular environment. So that's why what we call data collection that is being done in a natural setting. And again, we are saying in a qualitative research project, the researcher is a key instrument in the sense that the researcher becomes the most important piece, because he or she is the one who is able to see and to observe and to make notes about what exactly is important in terms of whatever is happening in that particular environment. Unlike where we are saying you are administering a questionnaire, the questionnaire becomes the key instrument. So the way how you are going to design your questionnaire must be able to make sure you must design in such a way that it must be able to help you to come up with credible and trustworthy data. But here we are saying the researcher is the most important thing. So for example, your interviewing skills are very important. Your focus group discussion moderation skills are very important. So you as the researcher becomes the key player in terms of whatever you are going to do and whatever you are going to actually do in that particular environment. So without you, the data collection becomes very difficult because you are the key instrument in that particular thing. And we are also saying that mostly in qualitative research projects rely on what we call multiple sources of data. So you just don't rely, for example, on one instrument. For example, you are just saying, I'm going to, to administer a questionnaire, I'm going to, to run probably, a survey monkey, a monkey survey, kind of, instrument. But rather we are saying you're going to use so many instruments to be able to come up with your data set. For example, you can do face-to-face interviews. You can do what we call group interviews, which are also called focus group discussions, or you can actually just go there and observe. Or you can actually say, rather, I want to understand what actually happens in terms of the profitability of this particular company. So I would rather want to see your annual reports or your quarterly reports. So document analysis becomes very important. You can actually even do an audio visual where actually you are recording whatever is happening so that you can then be able to make sense of whatever behavior is actually being showcased in that particular organization. So in that case, we are saying it's very important to be able to use multiple sources of data so that one data instrument instrument or one data collection instrument can actually be, be supplemented by other, other ways of doing things. So for us, in terms of qualitative research, it's very important that you understand, participants' meanings, but also you must also, be able to understand, inductively what is actually happening in terms of your data set. So we use what we call an inductive way of, of reasoning in terms of how we then arrive at this particular, data sets. Unlike, in a quantitative way, the thrust mostly is to focus more on the deductive, analysis of, of data. I think you can move on to the next slide. We are also saying that in terms of data analysis, there are various ways in which you can actually do that. There are steps that can actually be used in terms of how then do you systematically analyze the data that you have collected. So it's very important that you collect the data. After collecting the data, the second process that you actually have to go through mostly in a qualitative study is actually to transcribe. So for example, maybe you've done your interviews in vernacular language, or you've done it in English, and then you have to transcribe it and write it in such a way that you can be able to make sense of it. And from there, from the transcription, once you have everything that you have done has been transcribed, what follows then is to make sure that you come up with you have to be able to come up with codes, but these codes actually come as a result of what we call thematic content analysis, or thematic analysis of the data. So wherever now you are reading through your transcribed data, you are trying to pick themes that have emerged from that particular data set, and these themes are the ones that then guide you in terms of what exactly you need to actually do to make sure that you come up with credible information. So again, we are also saying not all information can actually be used, so you need to be able to winnow the data. So it means you have to sift through, chaff must actually be left out and remain with the grain that can actually be able to be used in that particular. So not everything that you're going to get from your data is going to be useful. There are some codes that pretty much you may not be able to use in that particular thing. So again, it also has to mean that the research also becomes a very important instrument here, where you are able to say, this is this is an out of this world kind of a quotation. Just picture yourself, for example. Why is it that certain, for example, let's say you are reading a newspaper. Why is it that there are certain quotes that you find in a newspaper article and you don't, there are certain quotes that you also don't find? So that process of actually saying, this is the most important quote that I have to do, is the same thing that a data analyst, a qualitative data analyst must also think about, to say, what then makes sense in terms of this particular study? What is the most newsworthy, or what is the most important data set that I can actually use in this particular, thing, so that I can actually group it and come up with specific thing. So we are also saying you need to aggregate data into small themes, and we can probably come up with 5 to 7 themes according to Creswell. So it's again, it's about themes. So for example, let's say you're dealing with organizational culture, for example. So you need to break down whatever data set that is coming out from that. For example, maybe you can say, maybe, one theme could be around maybe internal organizational culture of the Department of Human Resources, for example. That could be a theme on its own. You can probably have another theme that probably deals with those that are working in the finance department. You can also have another theme that has to do with people that are, in the marketing and, communications department or something like that. So it's about breaking down your data set into manageable, themes that can actually then tell a story. So at the end of the day, what you want to do with the data is to tell a story, or to narrate something that is coherent enough so that somebody can make sense of what exactly you were trying to look at. So in many ways nowadays in qualitative, we don't really do it pretty much manually. We have also different types of software that you can actually use to do qualitative data analysis. For example, you have in vivo that can actually be used to analyze what we would call qualitative data set that comes from focus group discussions. But again, you need certain skills to be able to use in vivo to help you to make sense of your data set. So it deals with a lot of data that you can actually gather, then you put it in there, and then it allows you to thematize, or to come up with themes that can actually be analyzed concretely in terms of your study. I think you can move forward, or I think Dr. Mnangatire can come in if he has something to say before we move on. Yeah, Dr. Mnangatire, can you come in?
Thank you, Dr. Mari.
Okay.
Dr. Mnangatire.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll pretty much then continue from where Dr. Murray left regarding qualitative data analysis. I think basically we need to go in at the very basic of qualitative data analysis, because there could be many other different ways in which we analyze data. But I think the key things are starting from what we are looking at now, that when you are looking at analyzing qualitative data, it has to start from your research objective, which has got to be in line with your data collection and how you actually collect the data, because you need to make sure that you collect data that is able to answer your research questions. So if that is not done right, then the analysis itself will not be right. So basically, in terms of analysis, we can look at what we call content analysis and thematic analysis. In content analysis, in most cases, if you read in literature, most authors look at this as one and the same thing, but there are few who are trying to separate them. But at the moment, what matters is just in content analysis, we are mainly looking at to describe the data more than to interpret. But in thematic analysis, we are more focusing on interpretation of the data rather than describing the data. So if you look at thematic analysis itself, it's a form of content analysis, because what are you looking? You are looking at the data, but you are specifically looking at what are the themes that are coming out in the data. You can move to the second slide, Dr. Oyo. So I will focus mainly on thematic analysis, but it's very important to note that the steps between thematic and content analysis, there's a fine line in terms of differences. If you look now on the content, on the thematic analysis, we all have to organize the data and prepare it for analysis. Just like what Dr. Murray highlighted, sometimes you need to change into a different language, that's translation. You need to change your audio maybe into text. And there are many ways you can do it. We used to do it manually, but I think with technology, there are some softwares that can help to do it electronically and in a very fast way. So Dr. Murray also highlighted that data analysis starts from the process you are starting to collect data. You are already analyzing the data. How are you analyzing the data? You need to be familiar with the data that you have collected. You have conducted an interview, you have gone for an observation, you are seeing people, the way people behave. You ask yourself questions. Why are they behaving in the way that they are behaving? Why are they saying the things that they are saying? So already by asking yourself those questions and writing them down, you are already starting the process of analysis. So in qualitative, we prefer that you collect your data if possible, because that will help you to get the process, what we call familiarization. You have a sense of what are your participants talking about? What kind of behavior was being displayed? So only when you get familiarization with your data, what is it that they are talking about in particular, then you can go to a process what we call coding of the data, where you start to organize the data into small pieces. Then these small pieces at coding, you also realize that when you've developed your codes, they can combine together to form something that you go into categorization. And this process will go on until you reach a formation of a theme. And when you get to a theme, you need to look at that theme, review it, and see, is this theme really different from the other theme? Because sometimes you may have two themes that are saying the same thing. So you may end up actually combining the themes to make one. So the unlike quantitative data analysis, which is more straightforward and systematic, qualitative data analysis is a process of going forth and backwards. You can make a code on a certain data when you read the first time. When you read the second time, your interpretation is different. You are allowed to change. So you need to do that until you get to a point where if you read the piece of data, your interpretation remains more or less the same. I think Dr. Mare or Dr. Woyo would have talked about what we call data saturation. That's what we call saturation, where we are saying there's nothing new that is coming out of the data. Should be applied when you are collecting data, should also be applied when you are analyzing data. When you cannot make a different interpretation of any part of data, then you have reached what I could call an analysis saturation, because you cannot make any other interpretation besides the one that you have made. So when you review the themes and you are satisfied that your themes are 4, your themes are 5, like different authors would recommend different number of themes you can come up with, but they should be at least 4, not less than 4. And also they should not be too many. Like Dr. Mare highlighted that Creswell recommends 5 to 7, which is quite acceptable. So I would want to go deep down into some examples to see how it really works in practice. With your permission, Dr. Oyo.
Thank you, Dr. Mnangatire. There maybe if Dr. Mare, if you want to chip in, I also see Prof. Mensah. Prof. Mensah is purely a quantitative guy like me. I'm sure he's going to be quiet and following. I also see Dr. Amadila there. Dr. Amadila, Dr. Mnangatire, Dr. Mare, these are more qualitative researchers I have on my team. So you are free to interject now and again when some colleagues are presenting. So at the moment, if there are no issues, Dr. Mare, we can allow Dr. Mnangatire to go block by block, talking about these steps of data analysis. And I would want maybe the two of you, Dr. Mare, Dr. Amadila, to also come and chip in terms of making this presentation a little more engaging and a little more richer for the purposes of me, who is more quantitative, and the audience as well. So I don't know whether Dr. Mare, you have anything to say before we move to the next one.
Let me just say one or two things. I think I just want to echo what Dr. Mnangatire has pointed out in terms of data saturation. I think it's a very important aspect in terms of qualitative research. So even if when you are doing your research in terms of probably doing your interviews or you're doing your focus group discussions, the most important thing is to get to a level where we say you have reached the data saturation. You have asked something, you have asked somebody on a particular issue to the point that they have explained everything and anything that you think is very important in relation to your that particular area that you are focusing on. So when you reach that data saturation, it's very important that you attain that stage. And the same applies again when you're doing your analysis. You must read your data as many times as possible. So it's not a rush to just say I want to come up with as many themes as possible, as soon as possible. You don't do that. It's about making sure you read your data set slowly and surely, so that as you're doing that, you can be able to pay attention to other things that are recurring or some patterns that are emerging from that data set that also requires maybe finer analysis or something like that. So it's very important that you reach your analysis saturation so that you can be able to make sense of your data. Otherwise, sometimes you end up, packaging your findings in a haphazard manner because you are just rushing to just get the thing out there to the ordinary people. So it's very important that as you deal with your data, take your time. And also it's very important that you, as a qualitative researcher, we actually say, do the research yourself rather than subcontract somebody to go and do it for you, so that you can be able to familiarize yourself with the data set. Otherwise, if you subcontract, it becomes very difficult for you to reach the stage that Dr. Mnangagwa was talking about in terms of familiarization, because you are not familiar with the context, you're also not familiar with the data set, and then it becomes very difficult to make sense of it. So that's why we're also saying the researcher becomes a key instrument throughout the research process, because he or she must be familiar with the context, must be familiar with the data instrument, but also must also be familiar with the data that he or she is going to gather from that field work. I leave it to Dr. Mnangagwa to move on.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mari. Yes, I will proceed step by step. If possible, you can also connect through the chat just to pass on some comments or anything that we need us to clarify as we go along. The first step in detail, you have your transcript in front of you or your audio visual that you have, or you are observing, because when you are observing, you are there and you have your data observation instrument. That's quite a bit different though. So if I read this part here from a transcript of an interview where we are interviewing parents regarding how they are managing with school kids during this time of COVID. One participant said this to say, I find it frustrating that we have to continue paying fees during this COVID-19. Our kids are not in school. I'm taking a lot of time helping the kids. Now I need more data, more stationery. I don't see the need to pay fees. If anyone should be paid, it's me. I'm the teacher now. So when you read that, there should be ideas coming to your mind. What is it that is coming to your mind? For example, for me, I can say parents are complaining. That is one thing that is coming to my mind. Parents are concerned with fees issues. And also something that would come to my mind, these parents most probably are from private schools and not government schools. So, so when you do this, you are getting sense of your data. And these things that come to your mind as you are reading, it's advised that you write down as notes, because these are the things that will help you as you are going forward in the analysis. Let's move to the next slide. After you're familiarized with your data, you go to the process that we call coding. A code is just it's just a text. It can be a word, it can be a sentence. And when we are doing the coding process, we don't follow what we call factual science or hard sciences, as in quantitative research. It's primarily an interpretive act. This is whereby you, as the researcher, you become part of the research process. People have said something, but then what does this mean? Why are they saying these things? What are the consequences of these things that they are saying? So you are trying to discover hidden patterns that are in the data, hidden meanings that are in the data. So a code, what it can basically do, it can summarize data. So which means it's writing a full sentence or a full paragraph in a sentence or in a word. It can also condense the data, making something longer become very shorter, and it also reduces the data. Because in the process, you have 10 interviews, which are 10 pages each, but your findings are not going to be 100 pages. Maybe they're going to be 5 pages. How do you get to the 5 pages? We start that process of coding of condensing and reducing the data. What will you be doing when you are coding? You are seeking for patterns in the data. Remember, you have a research question, you have research objectives. So now you need to see of this data, what is related to my research question? What is related to my research objective? Because not everything is relevant. Remember, in an interview, you may ask someone, can they describe what they feel about the weather today? They can start talking about the weather, but they end up talking about shopping. And then as an interviewer, you bring them back, but they've already said something about shopping. Then you need to think, is this shopping related to the weather? Sometimes there's a relationship. Sometimes it's not there. So you don't need to code everything. So what do we code? This is very important, especially for a novice qualitative researcher. These are things that you can look for in the data. Are there any cultural practices being mentioned? Are there episodes, for example, fighting, divorce, natural disasters? Are there certain encounters? Did they meet someone they get excited about? Did they meet someone who frustrated them? You can look at roles. What role is someone playing in this interview? Are they a father? Are they a student? Are they a bully? Is there a dictator? You also look at meanings in what people are saying, because we know that when someone says something, we want to understand why have they said that? What is making them say that? You can also code emotions, feelings, and many other things. I would ask colleagues to chip in if there's anything there regarding to what one can code. Dr. Madila, Dr. Mari.
From my side, I think you can continue. I think it's very straightforward. I think we can only come in when we are trying to summarize some of the key ideas.
Okay, thank you so much. We can go to the next slide, Dr. Mari. Dr. Woyo. Right, when you are doing that, now we know what we should code. But remember, in the process of coding, in a thematic analysis, you need to start seeing some patterns that are there in the data. This will help you to form the themes, because if you do not see relationships and patterns emerging in the data, you end up with codes and you do not know what to do with the codes. So how can we help you to get to the patterns? You can look at similarities. Are there any things that are happening in the same way? You also look at differences. Are there things that are happening in a predictably different way? You also look at frequency. Are there words that are being repeated? Are there certain specific patterns or emotions being shown? You also look at sequences. Is there any order of certain events? You also look at correspondence. Is there any relationship of one activity to the other, one event to the other, or something leading to the other, as in causation, like one thing appears and subsequently another thing appears? We can move to the next slide. Here's an example of a code that has been made here. So you can look at this statement here. I noticed that the grand majority of homes have chain link fences in front of them. There are many dogs with signs of fences that say, be aware of the dog. Then I came up with these codes. I'm thinking security. I'm thinking also fear. I'm also thinking crime. I can also see some patterns there that Probably this is a place with high crime rate. People are afraid of thieves, so they need to beef up some kind of security. But this cannot be conclusive because this is only one transcript I'm looking at. I need to look at the second, I need to look at the third until the 10th. Is this pattern continuing? You may find that if you go to the next transcript, it's completely different. You go to the third one, a different pattern starts to emerge. We can move on, Dr. Oyo. Here, I have tried to put in something here, also in terms of codes. What exactly did I code? If I read this, it says, I find it frustrating that we have to continue paying fees. I've read this before. When I code this, I found that there are feelings that are being expressed. I also found that there are thoughts that are being expressed, and there are also roles that are appearing. So once I saw those ones, I said, my coding has been just made easy. What are those feelings? There is frustration. What are those thoughts? I think we need to not to pay fees. What are those roles? Parents have now become teachers. So I've come up with codes. We can move on, Dr. Woyo. So when you have developed your codes, you can have a lot of the codes, many of them. So, however, because the data you are analyzing is from a group of participants that have something in common, that we have chosen to participate in the study for a specific purpose, there will obviously be a link in the codes that you are generating. So you may find that in the first transcript, you create maybe 20 different codes. In the second one, you may find that you are repeating the codes that you have found in the first transcript, or you may add a few new ones. So as you go on, you may find that you read also what I would call code saturation, whereby now the codes that you are applying to the other transcript are the codes that you have already discovered in the previous data. So that would then help you now to start forming relationships, to start seeing certain patterns appearing in the what? In the data. If I look at this one in terms of identifying patterns, you find that there are causes. What are these causes? Because our parents have got feelings of frustration. Then I ask, where is it coming from? There are causes. What is that cause? From the data, it looks like they are frustrated because they have more work to do now. They need more data. So maybe, and also now maybe the financial pinch is on them. So that is what is causing their frustration. So I'm seeing patterns in the data. There's also some kind of sequence that you can see. There's COVID-19 there. What has happened because of COVID-19? Our kids are not in school anymore. And if our kids are not in school, what is happening now? Parents' role has expanded to become a teacher. So there's a sequence of events there. And that sequence of events, I can even go and say, oh, so if this has happened, it has also led to the what? To the frustration. So I'm developing some kind of patterns in my data. We can move on. I put this part here for us to look at how do we change codes to become categories by identifying patterns. And when we identify these patterns, we start to draw codes from different places so that they come together. So for example, here I have a list of codes, and these codes are about feelings or people, what people think about their president. So what is it that they have in common, these codes? One, they are all feelings. And what are the feelings? They are all feelings towards their president. But the feelings are displaying two different messages. The other ones are of a negative connotation. The other ones are of a positive connotation. So I can say all these codes, they can give me a category. But what is that category? Feelings about the president. So you see that the codes have been compressed down into smaller parts, which are categories. In this category, I can have subcategories, which I say the subcategory A is positive feelings towards the president. Category B, negative feelings towards the president. It's not a must that you should always have subcategories. Certain categories do not have subcategories. It's just a category on its own. So when you are going forward, you need to ask yourself again, are all these feelings, are they really feelings? Maybe if I look at cheated, is cheated a feeling? You can then ask yourself, and when you answer that question, and the answer remains, yes, it's a feeling, yes, it's a feeling, it means that that code remains in that category. But if cheated becomes something else, no, cheated maybe is an activity or it's an action, then maybe somewhere you have codes to do with action, which means you can then remove it from this and move it to that other category. We can move on to Dr. Oyo. I have another example where I just see how this one has become a category where someone is telling them about themselves as a member of a community. So they are saying, I'm just an ordinary member here. I live a simple life following the culture and practices of the people of this tribe. I don't really belong here. I'm Swahili and more into Christianity. Yeah, so I'm just one of those people living in this community. Then I created these codes: position, culture, ethnicity, belonging, religion. Do they have something in common, all of these ones? I thought maybe it's all about identity. Who are they in this community? They are seeing themselves as a nobody, as just someone who fits in. We can move on. So for you to make good categories, you need to make what we call a rule for inclusion into the category. For you to be able to go and pick up codes and put them into a category, you need this rule. Right. In quantitative, we talk about reliability and validity. Those apply to qualitative data, but using different concepts. We work with the concept of trustworthiness. And if you look at things like credibility, dependability, confirmability, they talk about how did you collect the data? How did you analyze the data? Can someone else come and analyze this data and arrive at more or less the same codes, more or less the same categories, more or less the same themes, if they follow the rules that you set? This is why it is very important, such that when you give me your codes and you give me the rules for your categories, I should be able to pick more or less the same codes you picked and put them into one category. So like here, this is an example of a rule of inclusion. Participants talk about how they feel about the president. So when they're talking about their feelings about the president, any code to do with that belongs to this category. Another rule is, for example, participants share about matters that define who they are and their position in society. So what are the things that they are saying that are related to their position in the society? So anyone should be able to come and pick the same codes and put them in the category. So by the time you are writing that trustworthy was ensured in this study, when we look at your data collection, we look at your analysis, we should see that trustworthiness coming up. We can move on to the next one. So basically, you would find that our process starts from familiarization of the data, which lead you into creating codes. And we have highlighted what is it that you code in your data and what is it that you are looking for when you are coding. Then we moved on to how you make categories from your codes. Now from categories, you further reduce the data as you move into themes and sub-themes. I have the next slide, which should highlight how we transform categories into themes. Here is an extract taken from an interview of women about their experiences during the war. It is difficult to live here. The soldiers followed us and shouted at us, throwing all sorts of insults. You dog, daughters of the snake. Some of us are not only insulted, but beaten, pushed, and sometimes shot at. And other things I cannot say. Crying. Not all days are the same. Sometimes the good people come, they provide us with shelter, food, and medicines. We are taken to places of safety like this one. We feel safe here. They help us deal with the horrors outside there. Talking to us, praying with us, and other. Then you feel maybe there is hope. So from this part, I have just illustrated how you can move from the codes to the category and to the theme. I came up with the codes like hardships, hunted, verbal abuse, physical abuse, violence, and many other I have put there. I want to illustrate one important thing, that our codes should be grounded in the data. Let me look at hardships. Where is hardship coming from? Can you take me back to the slide? It's difficult to live here. Am I correct if I say it's a hardship? I think there is a link there. Life was difficult. So if I say they experienced the hardships, yes, it's based on the data. They have said that. The other one, I said hunted. The second statement says the soldiers followed us. Being followed by someone, is it equivalent to being hunted? Yes, it can be interpreted that way. So it means these codes are based on the participants' words. And that is a very key aspect of qualitative data and an issue of ensuring what we call trustworthiness and rigorous in your research. So I moved on now to say, I can create categories here. I created two categories. One category is about abuse. The other category is the opposite, it's about caring for women. Where is the abuse coming from? I put a rule. Any form of difficulty experienced by women due to the actions of the soldiers. What are those? Being beaten, being shouted at. All those are examples of difficulties. So they can fit into this category. I can also put different subcategories under abuse. There's physical abuse there when they are actually being beaten, being shot at, and other things they may not have mentioned. Then there's verbal abuse. They are being shouted. They are being insulted. So this can be different subcategories. But there's a pattern appearing. Ultimately, these women are physically hurt and emotionally hurt. Then I also have category 2. Category 2, there's the care of the women, which I put a rule: any act of kindness and care towards the women. So the protection that they were given, they're taken to safe places, provision of food, are all acts of kindness. The emotional support, the talking to them, the praying, are all acts of kindness. So I come up with 2 subcategories: physical comfort and emotional comfort. So you have seen how I moved from the data to quotes to categories. And let's now see how I moved on to the theme. So I moved on to the theme here. My theme, I have labeled it experiences of women during war. This is the theme. So in this theme, I need to describe what is this theme all about. The excerpt I gave here is an example of, I'm actually writing my findings section, be it in my article, in my chapter, in a thesis. The theme describes the experiences of women in the war zone in the remote part of Eastern Africa, and includes both negative and positive experiences. The women expressed that it was difficulty living in a war-torn area. There was always the danger of soldiers looking for them and subject them to both physical and emotional abuse. One woman highlighted that the soldiers followed us and shouted at us, throwing all sorts of insults. You dog, daughters of the snake. Why am I putting this? I want to highlight to the people that I am saying that they had a difficult time. The soldiers abused them physically and emotionally. Where is that in the data? This part should link what I have written here to what actually the participants expressed in the interviews. Then you now have your theme. On this point, I would like to hand over to Dr. Woyo and Dr. Maren, Dr. Madila also to come in and probably for questions and answers.
Thank you, Dr. Mnangatire, for sharing with us these steps in qualitative data analysis. I think some of us who don't belong there are actually benefiting a lot in terms of all this. So maybe before I open this floor to for people to have the interactive session, maybe Dr. Mari, you might come in, give some thoughts. Dr. Madila, you can also come in, give some thoughts. Then thereafter, I'll open this session for questions and answers. Then we will see what we can cover in the next 30 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Woyo. I think I just want to thank Dr. Mnangatire for doing such a great job in terms of breaking it down step by step. And the other issue I think that is also very key in terms of this is just to re-emphasize the issue that we've been talking about, that the researcher becomes a very important instrument throughout this process. Because for you to be able to come up with codes and also even to move from codes to themes, you must be somebody who is immersed immensely with the data that they are dealing with. Otherwise, if you don't have that kind of familiarity with the data, it becomes very difficult to make sense of some of these things. So I think that's where I think there are differences there between quantitative and qualitative research. Because whereas as a quantitative researcher, you can actually subcontract and outsource people to actually go and do data gathering for you, and then you come and do the analysis and then package it. As qualitative researchers, we don't have that kind of a luxury. We have to be in the field. We have to be immersed with the data so that we can be able to make sense of whatever we want to write about. So it's very important that we know our data set, but also is also what Dr. Mnangatire was pointing out. Whereas quantitative tends to gravitate towards issues around reliability, validity. For us, we are more interested in the trustworthiness of your data. We are also more interested in the confirmability of your data, how dependable the data that you have actually came up with is in terms of making sense of whatever social phenomenon that you are dealing with. So it's very important that as a researcher, you must make sure that you meet the rigor at the level of trustworthiness. Make sure that whatever theme and code that is coming from the data. Don't manufacture things outside of your data set. Otherwise, if you do that, then chances are that you may misrepresent what is actually obtaining in that particular field that you are carrying out research. So it's very important that you immerse yourself with your data set. You also understand your context, but also you familiarize yourself with the context. So that's very important in terms of doing thematic analysis of your data. But also, as I think we also talked about when we're starting, is saying nowadays we are lucky that we may not only have to rely on doing it manually. So nowadays we can also even use software technologies such as in Vivo, for example. It can help you to analyze some of these things in a more structured and less manual way. But again, I think in as much as we may rely on those particular software, the onus remains on you to make sure that you familiarize yourself with the data, because whatever the system that the software that you are using can only give you based on the quality of the data that you put in there. So if you put in rubbish, then you expect rubbish out also. So it's garbage in, garbage out. That's the rule in terms of how these softwares also operate. So you don't expect that if you didn't do your field work properly, then you think that maybe in Vivo is going to help you to come up with interesting data analysis. It's not going to do that. It's pretty much going to just reproduce what you've put in that particular package. So I think it's very important that we make sense of our data set, but we also do the part that is expected of us in terms of doing the rigorous research process that's required from a perspective of a qualitative researcher. I think I will stop there and I think allow others to come in and chip in.
Thank you, Dr. Mare, for that. Dr. Amadila, any words from you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Maybe it's just to thank the previous speakers, who explained in detail how the analysis of qualitative data is done. I think it was a very step-by-step process, and it gives one an idea of where they can start and go about it. But I think one thing just to add is to say never lose sight of your research question. That should always be at the back of your mind. You can have all the data you have collected, but always have why do I want to find out in this research? This is my question. This is what I want to find out. And even when up until the analysis, never lose sight of that, because the codes that you're going to generate should be chosen specifically because they are related to the question you're asking. Don't just code anything, even if it has nothing to do with what you want to answer. Otherwise, because that's what you're going to end up reporting, and at the end of the day, it will be like, no, but you didn't answer the question. You may have collected the information, but your analysis was not speaking to that question. So never lose sight of your research question, from coding to developing categories up until the theme. And before you do that, always prepare your data well. Check for accuracy. You know, normally when we collect qualitative data, we transcribe, we record, and we transcribe. So make sure that all the words are spelled correctly, because especially if you're going to use the software is not going to do the analysis for you. It's just to help you. You still have to do the analysis. So if you're going to put in the wrong things grammatically, and that's what you're going to get out, like Dr. Mary said, garbage in, garbage out. So prepare the data well, code it, even the transcripts themselves, it makes life easy for you. We cannot emphasize enough. I think the more you read, the more you look at the examples that are given by others, that's how you develop it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Maybe as a way of opening up, today I'm a student also, because I am still learning the ropes to do qualitative research, thanks to the team that I'm working on a number of projects. I would want to ask, because this is what we normally do in quantitative research, maybe as a way of where Dr. Mnangatire was talking about the codes, because in quantitative research, I can actually develop the scales of my measuring instrument from previous literature, from previous scales, and simply try to use them. So me thinking around that line, I want now to transfer this kind of skill into a qualitative research. So the issue is, when I'm coding, will it be good for me only to develop codes based on the data that is the data that I have collected, or on the information emerging from the data collected, or I can also develop codes based on literature that I have predetermined. Then I fit the information that I get from the survey into the codes. Can something like that work out? Dr. Mnangatire, I think me and Prof. Menza, I don't know whether Prof. Menza is still around. We are the only quantitative people here, and this is pretty what we do. So I would want to find out, if I am to code, can I use that idea? Like, if I'm to develop a scale, I can use what Prof. Menza developed maybe in the 70s and try to use it and do some replication studies and all that. But I am asking now that if I am to do qualitative research, I see there are students who are doing qualitative research here. Will it be possible for me to do coding first based on my abstract idea from literature, and then I fit in the information that I have gathered from the interviews into the codes that I have predetermined?
Oh,
unmute yourself. Unmute.
hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yes, I'm saying basically in qualitative data, we are saying that the results, our findings are coming from the data. So the issue of going in with predetermined codes, you can do that, but you need to have one very important thing in qualitative data: flexibility or reflexibility, in which you can go with predetermined thoughts. It's normal for any researcher to go into a data with your own preconceptions, because you are part of the process, right? But then when you are going through that data, your preconceptions should be shaped by the data, not the other way. The data should not fit into your preconceived codes or preconceived ideas. Remember what Dr. Madila said. You have a research question that you need to answer. And obviously, if you have done your data collection right, if you have asked the right questions, the answers that are coming are answering your research questions.
So your predetermined codes are based on that research questions that you want to answer. Yes, you have done literature and you have done something, you have found something. But the challenge is that when you're doing qualitative, you are doing in an area where you have limited knowledge in particular of what is going to happen. For example, if we're talking of experiences of people, maybe the experience of people regarding COVID-19, the experiences of people in Windhoek may be different to the experiences of people in Walvis Bay. So your literature have told you that in Windhoek, when there was the issue of COVID, they experienced it this way. You can go with those preconceived ideas, but you are not going to impose them on the data. You are going to let the data speak so that you can now shape what the data is saying rather than the other way. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that. Anyone with a question, you can just raise your hand and then I allow you to come in. Go ahead, Dr. Madila.
Okay. No, I just wanted to add on that to say, I think what you're talking about is now the issue of deductive and inductive approaches, right? It's very much, yes, it's possible. You can from literature, of course, you get an idea of what others are saying. And that can also help you as you now start with your own coding, because qualitative requires a lot of thinking in terms of what word to use here. You can use some of those you have collected before to bring in your data, but as long as it's related to what you are asking, it's possible you can bring those codes in. And then when you report now, how did you go about your analysis? You can then say you use both the inductive, you're open to what was coming out of the data that was new, but you were also relying on literature to support what others have done and link it to your results. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Amadila, for that. We are on this platform to learn. Anyone with a question? I was seeing one question from Vivian. I think Vivian is from the University of Pretoria. She's saying, she's asking, what is the difference between literature review and literature survey? How do you select theory you want to base your framework on if you have multiple theories? If you have multiple theories from your topic. Let me respond to the last one, then I would leave other supervisors on this platform to respond to the other issues. You know, the reason why we do literature review is for you to determine which theories you can actually use to explore the research questions in your study. So when you are looking at the choice of theory, it has to be, its appropriateness has to be determined based on the amount of literature that you have read, and you also need to determine the appropriateness of the theory that forms your theoretical framework based on your problem, the nature of the problem that you need to address. So it's quite very important that you read around theories in literature and determine whether they are applicable to the scholarly study that you are doing at the moment. And you do also need to find out what could be the reasons why you think it is applicable. And one of the things that you need to do is to think about the problem, the objectives that you have, and perhaps the deliverables or the outcomes that you need to do in your study, and try to reason around whether this theory is applicable and all that. So for instance, let's say if you are measuring intentions of people in a business context, there are so many theories out there and you need to read about them. One of them is the theory of reasoned action. Another one is the theory of, what is Addison's theory? The theory of planned behavior, and many other theories. So if you do proper literature review, it is going to help you to determine the theories that you need to use. So, and when you are, there will be many theories out there, and it is very important for you as a scholar, as someone doing a master's and someone doing a PhD, to show the reader that you understand why this theory is appropriate for the problem. So it's actually very important for you to have that. So the choice, how do you select, the selection part of it is entirely based on you, and it's entirely based on you convincing me that this theory is the most appropriate to the current study, and you give me a reasoned submission to why this theory is appropriate. So if you are looking at motivation, one would want to know why is Maslow not appropriate. One would want to know why is the two-factor theory not appropriate, and so many other theories. I'm not an expert in that, but there are so many theories that talks about that, and it's your responsibility as a researcher to show me why do I go for stakeholder theory, why not the social exchange theory, and why not the planned behavior theory, etc., etc. So anyone who can come in also here and tell us what is the difference between literature review and literature survey. I have responded to her privately, but it's important to have this. Maybe I would give this time to Prof. Mensah. He's a professor in economics. Maybe he might need to help us on this, and we move on. Over to you, Prof. Mensah.
All right, thank you. Hello, guys. It has been interesting and informative listening to you guys present these interesting topics. Yeah, I want to talk quickly about literature survey and literature review. Literature survey comes from long ago. When some of us were doing our undergraduate, the computer was the size of a building. And today, the computer sits on your lap. And so those days, you really have to go to the library and go through journals and find out what articles are there that are relevant for the work that you are doing. So you survey the literature. Today, you can survey the literature in a few minutes. If you have a good librarian, they plug in a few keywords from your research, from your topic, and they will give you a whole list of articles that seem to be related to your work. That bunch of articles you have, that is your literature survey. But that is not your literature review. You now have to look at these articles. You skim read them, read the abstracts, read the introduction, read the questions raised, read the methodology used, and then you narrow them down to articles that are relevant for the work you want to do. Now, these articles you now read more critically. So as you read, you are trying to find out what was done, why was it done, how relevant is it to your work, how it was done, the methodology that was used, whether it was quantitative or qualitative, and so on. And you want to take note of sample sizes that were used and justifications for such. You want to find the results, how the results were discussed in the context of the literature, and so on, before findings come in. Scopes and limitations. When you do that, you are reviewing the literature. You are now getting ideas from the literature that will guide your own work. But before you find the literature that you will review, you have to survey the literature. So one could conveniently say that literature survey is the first stage of literature review. I hope this makes sense.
Thank you, Prof, for that. I think it makes sense. So, Vivian, literature survey is something you look at surface level, and literature review is something you look at a much deeper level, and you would be now doing that to see how do you now have to contextualize your study and many other things as you try to justify why your research matters and why do we need to do this particular research at this particular moment. I don't see so many questions today, so maybe it looks like everyone is happy with the way we have articulated today's discussion and all that. Is there anyone who is doing qualitative research who would want to ask qualitative research questions at the moment? I have got a lot of these experienced supervisors today on this platform. I actually have 3 of them. Let me see. Right. So I think Dr. Munanga, today you have got the magic. Less questions today. Everyone was following. And it looks like everyone understood what you were teaching. And we really hope that this kind of teaching is going to help our students that are doing their research at master's and doctoral level to do qualitative research in a way that is much better, in a way that that makes us to understand certain things. I still need, you see, I have, this is a problem that I always see when my students are presenting their work. Probably it's the right platform to talk about it. I see there was a mention where people were talking about the software doesn't do the analysis. Maybe you as experienced scholars, I always tell my students that what you have presented to me, you have not analyzed the data. Maybe in 1 or 2 statements, Dr. Mare, Dr. Madila, Dr. Mnangatire, Prof. Menza, when you are reading an analysis section, for instance, what are you looking at and what does data analysis mean to you as an experienced supervisor and all that? I think it helps, especially when people are writing their proposals. They write a data analysis section of the proposal, but nothing there talks about how data is going to be analyzed. And I will still ask my students and say, how are you going to analyze the data? And I think in a couple of years, I have not stopped asking that particular question, because whatever is presented on that section of the proposal, it doesn't really articulate how data is analyzed. So in summary, and maybe as we are trying to close off, let's have that short discussion and say, okay, when you are looking at that, what exactly are you looking at? I'm sure it is going to benefit 1 or 2 students here, or even scholars. Even when you are writing, when I'm reviewing articles, that section, I'm always particular about it and I always make comments. So probably you have been frustrated by those comments as an author, as a student. Let us hear from the experts. Well, what do you look at? Dr. Mary, what do you look at when you are looking at analysis section of the proposal?
Okay, thanks, Dr. Warrior. So, I think there are 2 things here which I'm picking up. I think when we are saying in terms of the proposal, essentially when you talk about data analysis, we are saying, tell us how are you going to break down your data set and understand it and interpret it for us. So for example, I think Dr. Mnangatire talked about, in qualitative, for example, you can say probably I'm going to use, thematic analysis, or I'm going to use narrative analysis, things like that. But again, even if when you say that, tell us exactly which aspects of thematic analysis are you going to break down? Are you going to come up with codes? Are you going to come up with subcodes? Are you going then to come up with themes? How is it? Is it going to be derived directly from the data, or you are going to have a predetermined, coded, material that you are going to use to make sense of it? That should come out very clearly. But when we are talking about analysis at the level of probably a journal article, there obviously it's a bit more complicated, because there now we are looking at how you can actually use your data set, existing literature, the theoretical frameworks and other, conceptual frameworks to make sense of your data set. And I think you have your data, you have your literature, and then you have your theoretical framework. So the synthesis of the 3 makes what we then call an analysis, section of a paper. So when we are analyzing, when we are looking at the analysis there, we are saying, how does your data, how can your data be interpreted in line of existing literature? How can your data be, analyzed in light of the existing literature? Does it confirm existing literature? Does it disconfirm existing literature? What are the implications of the data in terms of existing, analytical tools that we have in terms of analyzing that particular, area? So I would say I'm answering it at two levels: at the level of research, and also at the level of a journal article where somebody is to use data to analyze things.
Thank you, Dr. Mari. So simply writing in a proposal that you're going to use tables and charts, that is not data analysis.
That's not.
And I have read it many times. And the Prof. Menza is laughing there. He has read it also many times. Maybe Prof. Menza, you can come in before I give either Dr. Mnangatire or Dr. Madila that.
Yeah, tables present information. They don't analyze the information. And so, unfortunately, I don't know the names, the doctor who spoke before me. When you are doing data analysis, you are showing what you will do with the data you have collected for the information that is hidden in the data to come out. It's like you have a bag of stones and pearls and so many other things, and you are looking for something specifically in the bag. So telling us you will look in the bag to collect it is not enough. How will you separate the different things in the bag for you to get what you are looking for? That will be data analysis. So for example, you will present your results. You will show how you will get results from the data. That is how the data will be processed. If it is qualitative analysis, we've heard of NVivo. NVivo could do that for you. Atlas CIA will do that for you. But what will you tell these softwares to do? Because you can't just throw the data into the software and results will come out. You have to tell the software to do something for you. And when the results come out, you now have to place the results in the context of the literature. Whose results do yours confirm or contradict? Are there any known theories that your results agree with or contradict? And what are the reasons for this? When you bring this out and you then reach a conclusion, then you have done analysis. And from that analysis, you will give us your findings. That's what I want to say on this.
Thank you, Prof, for mentioning that. So I'm sure that we are all hearing that simply saying I'm going to use Atlas TI or NVivo to analyze data, that's not analysis. You are just telling us the mechanics or the software you are applying. But how is the data going to be analyzed? How do you unpack it? How do you make sense out of this data? Dr. Amadila, any comment on that before I go to Dr. Mnangatire? Dr. Amadila, you are on mute.
Okay. I was saying, I think Prof. Menza explained it well, and Dr. Mari, to say, the purpose of analysis is to say, okay, this is what I found, but so what? To give meaning to the questions you have collected, give meaning and tell us, okay, this is now the answer, but that answer should have gone through some kind of, you just don't take things as you were told or you were given and then put it on paper and you say those are the results. It's now your job to put that analysis to work. It like you say, Dr. Wall, that to say Atlas TI will be used, and Atlas TI doesn't analyze. What are the steps that are you going to take to analyze? And once you have now analyzed, you must still tell us now what steps did you take to come to that conclusion. And then when you say these are the steps I took, first I did this, maybe you say I first coded and then I developed categories, themes, and so forth. When we read your results section, it should really, even your results should speak to the analysis you reported. Because oftentimes we just find someone who wrote the steps they took and then we copy that, but really that's not what we did, because it will come out in your results section that what you reported that in your analysis section is not reflecting in your actual results chapter. So make sure that the two speak the same language. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amadila, for that comment. Dr. Mnangatire, do you have anything to say? You disappeared. Okay. I think he is gone. I don't see him online. All right. So thank you for coming. We were scheduled to do this meeting for 1.5 hours, so I have about 6 minutes left. And there have been no further questions that have been asked in this, or based on the discussion today. I would like to thank everybody for joining in. I hope this information is going to help you as you write your proposals, as you write your dissertations, your thesis, depending on what your university calls it. I see some PhD students around and some master's students around from think from Zimbabwe, from South Africa, and from Namibia. Thank you for coming. So in the last 2 weeks, we were talking about qualitative as a research approach. I think next week we are going to move on to quantitative research approach. Then we go on to mixed methods. Then after doing that, we focus more on the aspects of designs of these approaches. So if you are willing, next week we're gonna meet at the same time using the same link. Unless if I communicate earlier that today we are not meeting, we always meet on Friday at 4 p.m. to 5:30. And all we are trying to do is to capacitate each other, especially the students and early career researchers, to find their fit as they write their thesis, as they write their dissertations, as they write their articles. So from my side, I would like to thank you for joining. Sorry to those who are just joining now, like Vinia Lovisa, you joined at the end of the session, and we hope next time you're gonna come in a little early and get some good insights and then improve your research work. I know some of you are, in a few months, you are preparing to submit your proposals. So this platform is just going to help you to achieve that. So thank you, Dr. Mnangatire, for the lecture. And I think Dr. Amadila is lined up in a few days or in a few weeks to tell us about qualitative designs. And I'm so interested. She is one of my co-authors in qualitative research that I don't so understand. And I'm learning. And she also comes on board when I'm doing quantitative research that she doesn't understand, and she'll be learning. So thank you everyone for coming. It's bye-bye for now. Stay safe. See you next week.